Good evening. Welcome to the Dominance Academy. Got a special broadcast this evening for you guys. It's based on a conversation that I was having with my submissive and a discussion that she discovered online that she was part of, but it had to do with love and BDSM. And there are camps out there that firmly believe that if you are in a power dynamic, that you can't really be in what would be considered romantic love with a dom or with a submissive. So we're going to explore that a little bit. And as before, as I've mentioned, please do check out my new book, which is the CODEX of the Sovereign Order. Give that a look and give it a buy. It's in paperback as well as a digital download. And then there's also the How to Be a Dominant Lover. Give it a read, and please do leave me a positive review if you did find it to be positive. I'd appreciate that. All of my clients, they get a copy of this book. Well, they get access to both of them. So that's a bonus to becoming a student. But if you're not a student, you can still get the books on your own and completely benefit from their information. So let's get into it. Love and where is it? No, not pair bonding. We already did that one. This one is about, can love exist in BDSM? And so let me give maybe a little bit of a background. So there's this idea. Well, I'll give a background about the conversation. So she was on Facebook. There's a number of Facebook groups and people who are in the lifestyle. And this was, some overseas folks. And this guy was coming on and saying, listen, real BDSM. And it's always funny when people say true BDSM, real, like a true dom, a real sub. It's tough when people start saying that shit. But anyway, so he's like, in a real dynamic, there is no room for romantic love because the dom must kind of remain cold and distant. He cannot involve his own heart. And, I find this, I'll leave my personal views out of this. So this is what he was saying. And there's a lot of people who follow this, a lot of guys, a lot of dominance and female dominance as well. And they believe that you need to keep your emotions out of it because it's not about that. And that it's more so important to establish, firm power dynamics. And so that kind of gives rise to this idea that one cannot have romantic love and establish a power dynamic. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if what he's saying is true, then how do I live this way? How do I help married couples and long-term relationships live this way? So surely it is possible. And that's what I find curious. So these guys, they kind of get stuck in a particular dogma and saying it is this way. It must be this way. This is the only way. And not realizing that the very crux of an alternative lifestyle like BDSM is based around understanding your own personal needs and desires, and it comes from a place of moving away from established setups. And so this is it's kind of interesting when someone comes at this topic and saying like having a very draconian way of looking at it. And surely a long time ago, I would say that like during like the like the leather era, the early times of BDSM, where it was really based around military. A lot of the attitudes came from military, and so I can see that. I can see and understand that like power and power structures really have nothing to do with emotions, and they don't. They truly don't. But they become much more enriched when we do involve our emotions, when we do involve our presence as a human being, instead of just an entity and only just this process, like part of a process. And I think that's when these connections can actually become quite profound. And this is what I promote. I promote that you actually do get very much involved, and you're no longer just this you're no longer just like a character playing some kind of role, because that's not really what it's about. That, at least that's what I think. So these beliefs, they stem from certain gatekeeping or purist perspectives within some BDSM subcultures, right? Because there's many, like within the umbrella. So BDSM as a culture is a subculture, and then within that there are subcultures, and it's often rooted in older traditions or specific online echo chambers. However, based on a broad range of community discussions, they're far from universal truths, and more like subjective opinions that don't hold up across the diverse spectrum of BDSM practices. So BDSM is fundamentally about the consensual exchange of power tailored to the individuals involved, not rigid dogmas. And so here's like a bit of a breakdown of my thoughts on this. So the idea of romantic love having no place in true BDSM. So that this idea that love can't or shouldn't exist between a dom and a sub appears to be a minority view, possibly influenced by stereotypes of BDSM as purely transactional or scene-based without emotional depth. In reality, many practitioners emphasize that romantic love not only can coexist in a DS dynamic, but often enhances them, fostering deeper trust, intimacy, and longevity. So for instance, aftercare, which is the post-scene emotional and physical support, is frequently described as a key way doms express their love, turning intense sessions, like intense sadist sessions, into acts of profound care. Subs often report developing strong romantic feelings due to the vulnerability and connection involved, and it's seen as entirely normal rather than a dilution of true BDSM. Community voices, including from doms and subs in long-term relationships, highlight that love can make the power exchange more authentic and sustainable, as long as boundaries are negotiated clearly. Dismissing romance outright ignores how BDSM overlaps with vanilla relationships for many people. It's not an either or. There's many couples out there where they have a regular vanilla type relationship that most people see. But then when they're in the privacy of their home or the privacy of their bedroom, that's where it exists, because that's where they feel most comfortable expressing it, or they feel that that's where they can only express it. And that's perfectly fine, because we all have varied lifestyles, and we don't want to just like leak out. Patricia doesn't want to go to the PTA meeting wearing a collar around her neck. She could, but she just doesn't want to, upset people, have to answer questions, this and that. So she's just like, you know what? I'm just gonna wear this dainty necklace, and it's gonna mean the same thing to me and my husband, but I don't have to answer questions or deal with people's silly looks, right? So it's not an either or. If anything, insisting love has no place comes across as prescriptive gatekeeping that limits personal expression in a lifestyle that's supposed to be about freedom with consent. So from X discussions, similar sentiments emerge. Users describe DS bonds as a harmonious blend of power and affection, where a Dom can own a sub while still holding and caring for them emotionally. One post even frames the Dom sub connection as an undeniable pull centered on devotion and hunger for each other, which sounds inherently romantic. True BDSM isn't defined by excluding love, it's defined by what works for the participants. The notion that monogamous, and then there's this other part where that guy who was saying, well, a real Dom doesn't have one-on-one subs. Like a real Dom has more than one sub. And he's not wrong in the idea that a Dom can have more than one sub if they choose to. But in my walks of life, my experiences within this lifestyle, most Doms have only one sub. And the fact of the matter is because we are human and we do involve our emotions. And part of that has to do with devotion. Like my promise and my devotion to that submissive as their guide, as their container, as the user of them as the object, the toy, the service item, what have you. And also my caring, my maintenance, like all of these things, okay? It's hard to do that when spread amongst many. Like I could do this with 1 to 3, at 3 at most. But because I have businesses to run, I have a whole life that is not connected to this lifestyle. And so I don't see having much time beyond 3. Like 3 would be really pushing the limit. Because you'll see if like you do have just one submissive that you're really paying attention to, that you're really trying to guide, and you're trying to form and kind of help them meander through their own authentic expression, it takes a lot of time and attention. So this notion that monogamous DS isn't legitimate, or that a true Dom must juggle multiple subs, seems tied to polyamorous or hierarchical models in some BDSM circles, where one Dom oversees a stable or a pack. But this is just one flavor amongst many. BDSM isn't inherently poly or mono. It's whatever the people involved agree on. Some Doms prefer exclusivity for deeper focus and emotional investment, like myself, while others thrive in poly setups. Claiming monogamy isn't real dismisses valid relationships where a single sub fulfills Dom's needs and vice versa. In fact, poly DS can introduce complexities like jealousy or divided attention, which isn't for everyone, and guidelines often stress communication to integrate it without drama. The key is consent and compatibility, not adhering to a true Dom archetype or prescript that mandates multiples. And what I've seen is an appropriation of a number of things. I've seen people appropriate BDSM so that they can abuse. I've absolutely seen this. I've seen female Doms appropriate BDSM dynamics simply so that they could extract money from unwitting subs or male subs by constantly asking for tributes. I've only known a couple of female Doms who do not ask for tribute. And the vast majority of the Doms, right, because women can be fake Doms as well, they're always asking for money. And they're always asking for money up front. And they're always these fin Doms. There's tons of different types of Doms, but they all happen to be fin Doms. Isn't that curious? So there's a lot of people who take the lifestyle and they just put it on like a hat in order to exercise some other like devious desire. And that's just the reality of it. And I think people do the same when it comes to poly. I think as much as poly is talked about, I think there's actually a very small percentage of people who are truly comfortable living this way. And then there's a number of people who adopt it because it's trendy. And there's other people who adopt it so that they can just have a roster and kind of like disguise it as this new social means of being together. And And so there's that level of deception as well, appropriation. So I think there's very few people who are authentically choosing these things. And for the same reason, I also think there's very few DOMs who authentically wish to have multiple subs and are able to run that stable in a fulfilling way for everybody involved. I think it's incredibly rare. I mean, forget power dynamics. I don't know very many men who have a stable of women and everyone is feeling fulfilled. It's extremely rare. I know one guy that I've talked to at length who has multiple wives, and they're not state recognized marriages. They're religious marriages, but everybody's involved. Like everybody's on board, including their parents. So, this is a very unique situation. Everybody's happy, everybody's healthy, everybody's doing it within their own volition, and there's a lot of commitment involved. But this is only one that I know of. But I do know a ton of guys who talk about having a roster, talk about having a stable of women. And after I talk to them, I find out that they've never had a serious girlfriend. They've never kept one woman around and have her feeling fulfilled in whatever way, whether it's like serving him or being his fuck buddy or being a long-term committed girlfriend, like in any respect. It's either like very few, like one or two of these situations, or none at all. Yet he walks around saying, I've got all these women. I've got all these women on tap. And I'm like, there's just something's not adding up. Okay, because if you provide a fulfilling experience for women, they want to be there. And if you're talking to many, if you're integrating with many, then they all want to be there, or the majority of them want to be there. But you're just kind of like saying that they're there and you can kind of reach out when you can. So I feel like that's not really, I don't know, just something's a little fishy. So basically people talk a lot of shit and they do things and they adopt certain terms, they adopt certain, key phrases to frame their personal image to other people, so that they can get away with certain behaviors or convince someone that they are something that they're not. So getting back on track here, the X posts that I've seen reflect this diversity that I was talking about. So some users enforce a one DOM policy for subs, but acknowledge that it's not universal, while others note that DOMs can own multiple subs without issue as long as obligations are met. So one female Dom explicitly states that she doesn't mind subs serving others if they prioritize her, comparing it to like a pack hierarchy. Another emphasizes that ownership requires dedication and isn't assumed lightly, whether mono or poly. There's no one size fits all. Insisting that multiples as the true way just alienates those in committed one-on-one dynamics. And then conversely, those who are in one-on-one dynamics, they can't ostracize or alienate those who have multiple, because there's nothing in the acronym of BDSM that stipulates anything about mono or poly. It's open to interpretation according to the people who are involved and those that agree to that sort of setup. Ultimately, these beliefs might appeal to folks seeking a strict traditionalist vibe, but they don't represent the broader BDSM community, which values personalization over purity tests. If you're just exploring this, focus on what feels right for you and the person that you're with. Negotiation and mutual satisfaction are at the real core of it all. And that's pretty much like the whole gist of love and BDSM. But I can tell you that there's a different level of leadership when you are a Dom for a sub that you don't have an emotional connection with. I've been there, and it's different. There's like the level of care is different. There's I don't know, the sense of ownership is different. It's the difference between someone like renting a car and you take care of it because you know it's not yours, but it's yours for the moment, and you're not going to try to fuck it up or whatever, versus a vehicle that is yours and you're going to take care of it in a different kind of way. And even some people develop like emotional bonds with their car. I mean, I have an emotional bond with my motorcycle. It's just a machine, but it's the relationship shifts. It's not like a 90-degree shift. It's just like a deviation. But that deviation means quite a bit, because if you take two lines and you separate them in a V just ever so slightly, after about 10 yards, those two lines are extremely far apart. And that's kind of what happens when you start involving deeper levels of your psyche and your emotions, because what I've learned is that it's not just about doing these things. It's not about just the kink and the fun, although that's like a great aspect of it, that makes the learning and the development really enjoyable. Okay, like it's fun to do this stuff. I'm not gonna lie, but in fact, I just got. Maybe I'll bring it back down. I'll take a pause and show you my new toy. But there's the part about that involves you, the emotional and psychological aspects. This is what makes it transformative, and this is when it actually becomes a lifestyle. Okay, so if I can make like a parallel to religion, like there's some people who say, sure, I'm a believer of this religion XYZ, and let's say they only practice it, so to speak, like they do the thing, right? They do the religious thing once a week or twice a week, okay, or on certain holidays, and they come and they represent. But aside from that, they're just kind of living just a regular life, and that's fine. Like, it is what it is. And then there's people who embody it on a daily basis, every hour. They're in that state of thinking of themselves as this person who is devoted to a certain path, and this then becomes a lifestyle, because it changes how they approach everything. It changes how they approach their communication, their relationships with people, how they look at the world, how they look at themselves, how they look at their own existence, how they look at their own purpose in life. And that's when it becomes a lifestyle, because it starts styling your life. But just doing kinky stuff on the weekends, or going to like play parties once in a while, or hitting the dungeon every weekend, I wouldn't exactly characterize that as a lifestyle. You have a hobby, you have a kink hobby. Now, I'm not playing any sort of superiority thing here at all. There is no like better than, but I don't think you can call that categorically a lifestyle. Right? Like if I'm in martial arts and I train only on Saturdays, can I justifiably say I have a martial arts lifestyle? No, I practice martial arts on the weekends. But if I'm doing this, if I'm training multiple days a week, I'm constantly researching. I know the history of the thing. I know different people involved, like past and present. And it means something to me. And my life changes in many aspects due to the heavy influence of that martial arts practice. Now that martial arts has become a styling on my life. It has become a lifestyle. And I think this is the difference. This makes a difference when we start embodying these things. And that's why I wrote the Codex of the Sovereign Order, because it takes it a step further. It brings it into philosophy. It brings it into a different type of psychology. And if you're a religious person, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying, that there's a certain level of psychology involved in religious texts that's not exactly clinical. It's some other kind of psychology. And that's the sort of thing that's in the Codex of the Sovereign Order. And the reason why I did that, the reason why I wrote that book, is because I noticed the change in myself. I noticed yes, it's a fun lifestyle, but it's also a point of learning. Because I'll get to a point, I've gotten to many different points, like in my role as a leader, in my role as a dominant, where my self-concept was challenged. For example, I would think that I'm a certain way. I would think that I'm like, let's say I believed myself to be of a certain level of knowledge. I had confidence and pride in that. And then I come into a situation with a sub, whatever my sub is at the time. This isn't like exactly linked to a particular moment that I can remember, but I know this has happened where the situation occurs where that self-concept at that period in time was called into question. And I have a choice. Either I can defend that position and shore up my ego, like Captain America holding a shield, or I can soften and I can let the situation come through and catch that hook on the chin and let that rattle my consciousness so that I can start to see myself better, because that brings about clarity. And then I start seeing myself different. I mean, it hurts a little bit because I'm seeing truth within myself. And I'm like, fuck, like I'm not what I thought I was. I am not who I think I am. But from that unearths a new level of consciousness about myself. And now that unleashes like a whole nother level of learning. And I think this is the sort of thing that happens to like strong devotees of a certain type of religion, whatever it is. I think that's something that happens for people who make it into a lifestyle. They start breaking through layers of their own ego, and their ego, their sense of self, starts changing from something they thought they were, of who I am. I'm Bob Smith of whatever lane, living in whatever city. And all of that starts shifting. The sense of identity and the self-concepts start chipping away and revealing other ones. Sort of like a Matryoshka doll. Those Russian dolls, you pull it apart and there's a little one inside, you pull that apart, another little one, and you just keep going and going. And it's just probably infinitely small. And I'm saying, I've never been one to follow religion. It's never been my path. I've studied tons of religions, and I've gleaned a lot of useful information from them. But I was never called to it in that way. But something about this choice has provided me something that I think would be similar, at least in terms of personal development. And you can't do that if you are just being this Dom archetype, standing coldly distant, not only from the sub, but also from myself. Because I'm making myself firm and I can't be penetrated. And I'm not saying that in a sexual sense, obviously, but my ego cannot be penetrated. So that means I don't grow. I never change. I'm never evolving. Not based on social trends or new social concepts or anything like that, but more so an evolution of my internal self. And there's no real label on what that is. It's me, and I'm still me, but it's a different me. And this happens when situations arise and your heart and your mind are open to the point where you can take in criticism, not from other people, but allowing the situation to reflect you to yourself. And then you have the wherewithal to take that hit. Because you realize, like, all right, this isn't going to kill me. Yes, it's a harsh realization. Okay, big deal. But what am I supposed to do? Certainly not sit here and defend it. Like that's stagnant. That's stagnation. To hold firm on something. No, I'm not wrong. Come on. There's no way to progress that way. And so when your heart is open, and this is relating to having a heart in your dynamics, this allows you to grow as an individual. And then if we want to adhere to the standard idea where the male is the leader, or the dom female is the leader, then we are the ones who are setting the precedent. And we're saying, look, this is how this stuff is processed, because no doubt you, little one, are going to be faced with this. Your sense of self will be called into question. And it's actually something I'm going to initiate. I'm going to create scenarios. I'm going to create lines of dialogue. I'm going to get your mind thinking in angular ways, so that your heart is pulled in certain directions, so that your ego, it feels that tension of being pulled into a position that it is not, naturally like, or the way it's accustomed to be. And it's going to possibly rip. And it's going to cause you to think, wait, that who I thought I was isn't really who I am. And then there's that shakeup of having this questioning. But here you are, already having done that, maybe a number of times, and you're calm within, which allows you to provide that containment so that they don't just spin out of control psychologically. You're there to hold that process, hold them in that emotional state, that they can feel that great sense of uneasiness that comes from a breakdown of your self-concept, or your current self-concept, to lead you to a different self-concept. And so this is a way that you can lead, by doing the thing first, by being that leader. And I don't see how that can be done in a more plastic version of BDSM, where it's just like, I'm this role, I do this thing, I am not really involved, and you aren't really involved. We're interacting, but like at arm's reach. You know, that's fine. You know, you can do that. But I don't find that fulfilling. I don't find that transformative. I find it fulfilling and transformative when I purposely put myself into psychological situations where I can feel the tension and the pressure that I need to challenge something within me that has remained, you know, it's become stiff. You know, because I want to keep growing. I don't want to be the same person that I was 3 years ago. Like, if you're still thinking the same, behaving the same outlook, the same vision of yourself, the same attitude towards yourself, you become stagnant. You're on the way to becoming petrified. You know, like that wood becomes stone, or stone-like. You know, we're meant to evolve. We're meant to learn. That's part of the reason why we have these brains that separate us from other creatures on this planet. So should we have love in these dynamics? No. I'm not a big fan of shoulds. I don't like when people say should for pretty much anything. Aside from, I think people should give everyone a basic level of human respect. I mean, I think that goes without saying. But when it comes to like brass tack stuff, sure, there are some shoulds. But when it comes to like beliefs and choices and things like that, I don't adhere to shoulds. Except you should do what's right for you, as long as it doesn't cause harm. And but I do encourage doms and subs to break free from just the sensory experience, and just going like into those highs and then coming back to normal, high, normal, high, normal, high, normal, because it's still linear. Okay, you can still achieve that. And what I mean by high and normal is, say, like going to a dungeon on a weekend, you get that high, you do the things, and then you go back to normal when you leave that dungeon, you go back to work on Monday. Okay? But it's linear. It doesn't ever progress. What I'm suggesting here is that you can still have that high normal, but it does it in a trajectory like this. It has a diagonal upward trajectory. Now it may go up and plateau, and so on, and that's fine. Nothing exactly that perfect, but that high low happens throughout. From the experiences that we choose to create, the scenes that we make, and so on. So, yeah, personally, I really do think that more people should do this because there I am with shoulds, but I suggest that people explore involving their emotions more into these things, because what I've noticed from being a coach for about 10 years now is that this is where all of our problems lie anyways. All of our problems when it comes to interpersonal dynamics, whether they're vanilla or kinky, they stem from our emotional problems. They stem from our upbringings. They stem from the relationship that we develop with this archetype of the one who is our upbringer. Okay, whether it's like a mother, a father, uncle, some other person. Okay, and and we have this. There's a psychologist. I forget his name, but he came up with this idea, this term. I forget the name of the term. I remembered it a couple days ago, and now it slipped out of my mind again. But that's what it is. Imago. So the imago, imago definition psychology. Imago. So in psychology, imago, imago, Latin for image, is an unconscious idealized mental picture of a significant person, usually a parent or some other caregiver, formed in childhood that heavily influences adult relationships and partner choice. This internal template, including both positive and negative traits from caregivers, drives people to unconsciously seek partners who mirror these early experiences, aiming to either heal past wounds or fulfill unmet needs. A core concept which is a core concept in imago relationship therapy. So the key aspects is that it's formed from early childhood interactions with caregivers, shaping understanding of love and connection, and we're drawn to partners who resemble our imago, this archetype that we create, often repeating familiar, sometimes painful relationship patterns. And the imago contains both the good qualities that we liked and the bad qualities, which is the qualities we didn't like or their unresolved issues or unmet needs. And adult relationships become a subconscious quest to find someone who embodies both the positive and negative aspects of our parents, allowing us to complete ourselves or heal childhood hurts. And I can tell you, the vast majority of the guys that I've worked with and the few females that I've worked with, they all have this. The vast majority of them have this, where they're coming to me and we look at their problems and we start fiddling around, start asking questions, start meandering down psychological pathways, and we find that it almost 100% of the time gets distilled down to this issue. Issue that they had with a caregiver that set a certain pattern, which led to a certain belief. Right? Because children, we typically don't have good critical thinking skills. Right? We don't sit there and go, "Oh, mom's like an abusive bitch, or she's narcissistic," and I really shouldn't take that too personally because grandma was really abusive to her, or grandpa was really abusive to her. So I can understand why she's built this way. Kind of like if you see like a very vicious dog, and of course, your nervous system is gonna be like fuck that angry dog. I'm gonna go away, or I want to like kill it, or I want to put it in a cage or something, right? But if you know anything about dogs, like they're not born that way. Like dogs are all sweet when they're born, all of them. but they're made to be a certain way based on certain conditions. You find out it's like, oh shit, the previous owner never let them in the house. Just let them out, just kept them chained to like a 50-foot chain in the backyard their entire life. Through rain, snow, terrible conditions. The dog didn't even have a little house. It just like slept underneath the porch, you know? Never got to run around, never got to be played with. The only interactions were like yelling at it and maybe kicking it sometimes. What do you expect it's going to grow up to be? It's going to be vicious. It's either going to be scared of its own shadow, or it's going to be incredibly vicious. And the same thing is with people. They either shrink into almost nothing, or they become really dangerous. And this has been the case for almost everyone that I've coached, in the sense that their experiences are shaped by their past, and their self-concept is based on the beliefs that come from those experiences, because children don't have that critical thinking going, you know what? I get it. Mom is screwed up because her parents are screwed up and they didn't know any better and treated her like shit. And that's how she learned. And she believed that she wasn't good enough. And it led to a whole series of learned behaviors. And then that just ended up taking it out on me. And it's really not my fault. It still sucks, but it's not my fault. No, kids are going to go, that's my fault. Mommy or daddy is being a piece of shit to me, beating me, yelling at me, scolding me for whatever, just being really terrible, manipulating the hell out of my brain. I must deserve it. And there must be something wrong with me. And this is what a lot of kids do. They internalize because they don't have objective, critical thinking. It's just emotion. And they're very much ego-based. You know, babies, all the way up through, well, however, depending on the person, their entire life, but they're very egocentric when they're young. They just think about themselves. And that's okay. Like, that's part of survival. It's part of learning. But it's also part of what leads them to come to certain beliefs and conclusions about the terrible things that happen to them. And they say, well, I must deserve this. It must be my fault. And the belief becomes very real because it's tied together with emotion. And this is what makes beliefs very strong. There's no belief out there that is strong that doesn't have emotions tied to it. A belief without emotion is just an idea. It's a dream, it's a theory, it's a hypothesis. But you link emotion there. Now it's got some legs. It has substance to it. And that's how we make thoughts with substance. We bring thoughts to bring the substance into a thought. We must mix in something else, and that's emotion. So vast majority of the people that I work with, they have certain beliefs that are mixed in with emotions that they've acquired over time. And this leads to a whole host of problems in their relationships, kinky or not. And so if you use relationships in the right way, they can be an incredible vehicle for transformation, an incredible vehicle for healing. And you don't know it because what happens is a lot of people, they'll come into a situation that makes them upset. It starts triggering those things, and those nerve endings go all the way into their psychological past. And there's a child in there that goes, ow, that hurt. And that ow, that hurt could be connected to tremendous rage or tremendous fear or tremendous pain. And so that surface thing that's happening in the real time is sending nerve signals all the way back from the past into the present. And they start it turns into who knows what. It could turn into, some sort of domestic abuse. It could turn into passive aggressive behavior. It could turn into stonewalling. It could turn into gaslighting. There's so many things that this can turn into as a means of expressing that pain, that fear, that anger. And instead, what one can do as a conscious being is to go, hold on a second, pump the brakes real quick. this does suck. I can acknowledge that this situation is not good. But why am I having that visceral knee-jerk reaction of anger or fear or wanting to run away or hide or what have you? Why is that the case? And let's not complete the answer in saying, well, he or well, she. What is it within me that really wants to get away from the situation or to end it, either through verbal violence, physical violence, shutting down, running away, hiding? Why am I being triggered in this way? And I don't mean this in like the troll meme sense of like, oh, you're getting triggered. Blah. Like, no, like real triggering. Why does it flick that nerve, that psychological nerve inside? And that by not going down the path of just knee-jerk reactions, that there is the beginnings of your pathway to truth. And if you can handle it, then you grow. If you can't handle it, you don't grow. You do not evolve. You remain in that arrested development of that emotional nerve that goes all the way back into your psychological history, and you stay there. You remain that pissed off 7-year-old. You remain that pissed off or scared or hurt or embarrassed 7-year-old within the body of a grown adult, trying your best to process, trying your best to be right so that you don't have to examine, so you can just quickly pass it by. Do as I say, not as I do. Don't question me. Whack. That sort of shit. I had an experience with a teacher. It was actually not directly my Sifu's teacher, but my Sifu regarded him as someone who was above him. And this guy, he had that problem. He was a teacher of martial arts, but he was not a Buddhist at all. He did not go that way, right, in terms of like mind and heart and development and all that stuff. He was very much just into the surface level combat, and like that was it. And there was this party at the school. I can't remember for what. So there was these students or teachers, like, it was a good time. And there was this one guy there, and he was really, really strange. He was a unique guy. He was a little bit older than me. I don't know. Maybe he was like 22, 23, something like that. And he had just this weird way of asking questions where I think he had a gift. I think he was like a special person. Like, you could tell he was like slightly, just ever so slightly mentally disabled. In what way, I have no idea. But he also had something else. There was some other like psychological power that he had. And he could just easily just slip his hand right into you. It was bizarre. And the only reason why I could easily converse with him, and he didn't have like nefarious intentions or anything like that, he was just very curious. And in his curiosity and his ability to reach in, he would make people feel very, very uncomfortable, because it was almost like he could see people for what they actually were. And I had no problem with exposure, because that's just who I am. I have no problem with ego exposure. And so we were able to converse, because I didn't meet him with fear or discomfort. But this teacher, he reached his hand in the way he normally does, just with anybody. And the teacher did not like this. And his ego became very defensive, extremely defensive. And because he could feel what he was doing. And it wasn't like the kid was trying to do this. He wasn't trying to cause discomfort, but it was happening. And the teacher ended up backhanding him across the face and just dropped the kid. It didn't like knock him out, but just like dropped him to the ground, like onto his hands and knees. And I heard him. I didn't hear the conversation, but I heard him raise his voice. And I'm like, I'm telling you this once. Stop that shit. Because like the teacher knew what he was doing, and thought it was intentional. But it's because that teacher was not a regular at the school. He would stop by like maybe like once every couple of months, So he didn't know the kid. He had no idea like this is just how he was. And this is what happens. This is what happens when the ego feels challenged. It gets defensive. It becomes offensive, saying, get away from me. Don't touch me, right? Don't touch me there. It hurts. It feels uncomfortable, but you don't grow. I imagine that teacher to this day is probably the same way he was that many years ago. He's still rigid. He's become petrified. And this is the part that I like. This is not the petrification, but that discomfort of the realization of self that I believe can absolutely occur within this lifestyle when you make it into a lifestyle. Not you just call it a lifestyle because you own some cool stuff and you play with it on the weekends. Maybe you chat to some, doms or subs on FetLife. Like being interested in something is not a lifestyle. It does not style your life. There's a big difference. Hey, Nathan E. Pleasure. So, yeah, absolutely. See from the world within to see myself, see the world. Yes. So, this is why I encourage people to not just treat this as play. I mean, you can, and it's a lot of fun and whatever, but you can get so much out of this. And then, just as like a side perk, when you've helped a submissive go through themselves, like they can start seeing through themselves, their ego starts becoming permeable. They start permeating their own ego just with a little bit of your help, right? And sometimes overt help where you're just pushing your hand through. It's an amazing thing watching this girl shift, watching part of who, like certain habits or beliefs or how she felt about herself just flip, just drop off. It's a really, I don't know, my ego wants to say it's rewarding. Like I like it, it's cool. And then you know what happens? She really starts looking up to you. She really starts looking up to you at that point. There's a difference between looking up to you because you're a great guy. Because you're knowledgeable, you're cool, you do the right thing, either just whatever it is in her eyes that's cool, right? It's one thing to be looked up at in that way, or looked up to in that way. And it's completely different when she looks up to you from a place of exposure, where it's like, he's seen me, he's allowed me to see myself, helps me process the discomfort that comes from that, and allowed me to come out the other side not feeling bad, but feeling good about it. And it's something that I could not do on my own. Or if I were to do it with therapy, it would have taken years. And here's this guy who effortlessly did this. And then on top of it, did all the fun stuff too. So it's like mixing in, you got the batter, like you're mixing in the eroticism, you're mixing in the sadism, you're mixing in the tension, you're mixing in the bondage, you're mixing in the mind games, you're mixing in the edging, you're mixing in the erotic hypnosis, you're mixing in all these great things, the impact play, the degradation, the humiliation, but also humor. And all of this stuff, there's all these variety, physical and mental, psychological, emotional things that give that up and down sort of thing. All the while you're allowing her ego to become permeable. She's seeing herself in different ways. That level of looking up to you, it's totally different. It's completely different than just, he's a great guy, he does the right thing. I like how he shows up in the world, and I look up to him. And now that's not bad at all. Not bad in the slightest. but it doesn't compare to when you start influencing the woman or the sub, right? And we talk about things in this way because this channel is heteronormative. So I'm not going to be here like being super inclusive, including all the terms for all the people who may be watching this. And so if you get offended, I'm sorry. You know, I just don't have use for that many words. So have it upon yourself to reach for the concepts, not the details. And, you know, the woman, she'll see you completely different because she sees herself different. And that's the funny trap that guys fall into. They think, I have to change what she sees in order to change how she sees me. No. You don't change the lens, you change the eyes that are using them. And so you Zhao is 168. Yes. Right. It just the every statement would be 10 times longer than it needs to be. So yeah, you don't change the lens. You don't change what she sees. You change what she uses to see. And that's much more powerful. It's not as easy, right? Because so guys will be like, and this is where like the whole like black pill clavicular thing, like looks maxing, that whole notion, right? Forget about the titles that you want to put on it, but just this idea that I'm going to fashion how I'm visually perceived in order to change how they see me, right? And when we say how they see me, it's more like how they perceive me, right? Because it's not just the use of sight, it's sight plus belief, and that's perception. So I'm going to manufacture something to change the perception of me. And certainly you can do that, but there's a ceiling. And you're also dealing with other influences that can change that perception, various other stems that can inject into whatever they're perceiving. And then that perception becomes altered. But if you go for the eyes themselves, then you can permanently alter how they see you. And you don't have to change your appearance. You don't have to change their look to suit, you know, some kind of trend or whatever's popular or what do you think they think is great. No, you don't have to do that. If you wish to change how someone sees you, change the functioning of their eyes, change the functioning of their perception, but not by changing me or by changing yourself, change them. They say, well, how do I do that? Well, it's a bit more complicated, you know, than just changing your wardrobe and hitting the gym. You know, maybe getting a fancy pair of sunglasses. Like, it's a lot more complicated than that. It requires actual skill. And part of that skill comes about when you learn to do it with yourself. Like, that's the best way to create the tools necessary for doing it inside other people. I would be a terrible fucking coach if I hadn't done this stuff myself. And then I'm instructing people to do this, this, and this. I have seen the horrors within myself first, so that I know what these guys are going through. When they're looking at the abyss, when they're having their dark night of the soul type moment, where they're like, fuck, who am I? Everything that I thought I was, like, fuck blue pill stuff and talking about in red pill, like the world is a lie. No, it's my self-concept was a lie. It was just built up, it was just sticks, just built up of sticks upon sticks. Like a house of cards that looks like a house, like it stands on its own, but it's feeble. There's no substance there. It's just a collection of ideas put together over time. And so much time has gone by that it slowly just started to adhere. And now is perceived as mass. And so it's believed to be of mass, but it's not. It's an amalgamation. There's like stones. You ever like go to the beach, or you're hiking or something like that, and you see like this rock formation, and it looks like it's comprised of so many different types of rocks, but they're all just kind of like jammed together. And sometimes there's little like fossils of shells like embedded into it, and there'll be like parts that are like super textured, and there'll be some parts that are smoother. Like that's like an amalgam type rock, and that's what most of us have. It's just built upon for us over time, and we just accept it because that's just a natural process of it. Children, babies, they're not like, wait a second, I'm going to decide my identity. I'm going to decide how I perceive myself in the world. No, they don't have enough experience or knowledge or ego control or perception control. So, but later on, when you do have the power of critical thinking, hopefully, you can then challenge this stuff and bring yourself into a greater sense of who I am. But my guys, they all have gone through this portion. Well, not yet, but eventually they all go through it at some point within their development with the school. And it's a very, very uncomfortable, dark feeling. And it's like what the Gnostics of the Gnostic mystics, they call the what is it called? The Negredo period, this dark period, where everything you thought was the thing about yourself has now been stripped away. And they call this the dark night of the soul. And then there's a rising up out of that. And what helps is some of the teachings that I present. And not as something prescriptive, like you should believe this, you should believe this, you should believe this. That's not what we do, because the school is not prescriptive. What I do is I offer a model that you can build your own. And then that's what brings you out. By building this pillar, this internal pillar that brings you out from that darkness of having no knowledge and this like void, this abyss type sensation, and coming to a place of knowledge. And this brings you towards the light. And then there's different levels for each of these. I think there's 4. Narcissism. And Carl Jung used this a lot. Oh, this isn't what I'm looking for. Yeah, Negredo, Albedo, Centrinitas, and Rubedo. Those are the 4. So the Negredo is the blackening, the darkening, and alchemy, it's the putrefaction, the disillusion, chaos, darkness. And in psychology, how they look at it is that it's the breakdown of the ego's illusions, facing unconscious drives, complexes, and shadow aspects. And it's a period of confusion, despair, and spiritual malaise, and the necessary death of the old personality. And when you're in this place, it's like depression. But it's not the end of, it's really the end of something and the beginning of another. But that transitionary phase, it's pretty dark. And a number of my guys have already gone through this. And then they come out on the other side. And the beginning of this is the albedo, right? The brightening. So in alchemy, they call it the purification, the washing, the dawning of consciousness, where you start realize like who I am, but it's not built on this other stuff. It's like a self-actualization. And in psychology, it's the illumination, the developing communication between conscious and unconscious, building a relationship with the self, not based on what's happened to you. Okay. And then there's the third stage, which is the Trinitas, which is the yellowing. And in alchemy, it's the dawn of understanding, the sun's light appearing. And in psychology, this is the education, the exploring relationships, integrating insights from the unconscious into the ego. So this is where I find this is like, I think, where I'm at, because I'm finding so much like education and growth through the use of BDSM as a styling of my life. So it's the education, the exploring of relationships, integrating insights from the unconscious into the ego. And then there's the last part, the rubedo, the reddening. And in alchemy, this is the achievement of the philosopher's stone. Excuse me. Wholeness, the union of opposites. And in psychology, it's the transformation and individuation, integrating all aspects into a new whole self. And so this here is not a notching from one to the next, right? Like a second hand on a clock, just going tick, 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 tick. It's a blending. It's a blending process. Excuse me. Yeah, it's a blending process. So you'll phase between these things from one to the next. And while Carl Jung, he focused on alchemy and Gnosticism, Gnosticism shares themes of spiritual darkness, like the fallen world, ignorance, and the need for gnosis, which means knowledge, for liberation, with the psychological Negredo reflecting the internal descent into the material world and the chaotic state before awakening to the divine spark, or whatever you want to call it, aligning with the Gnostic search for inner light amidst darkness. And you might think I'm crazy, but like I have found that this lifestyle, this alternative lifestyle of BDSM, is just the way things are, like the power dynamics, how one must bring oneself to certain states in order to maintain a structure, and then that will eventually challenge you. It'll challenge your mind, it'll challenge your emotions, such that you're kind of brought into that transformative process. It's really interesting stuff. But you have to have balls. Like, you have to have courage for that sort of thing. It's, personal transformation is not for the faint of heart. But you come out on the other side and there's something undeniable about you. And this is the real deal. Yeah, there's something truly undeniable about you. Kind of like I was telling you about that story about Bill Peet. Well, he was the author, Bill Peet, children's book called Cowardly Clyde. And I told you about the horse and the knight that rode on his back, and the horse was dead scared, and the knight was a representation of the ego, and the knight was super ultra, like, way too confident. Bring on the monsters, we'll kill them all, like, just parading around like he was hot shit. And the horse was like, fuck, I really, really hope that we never do come across any monsters, because I'm really a coward. And the dogs on the farms, they knew he was a coward, because dogs can smell fear. And then they had the instance where they actually had a chance to interact with a troll or an ogre, something like that. And it was in the forest, and they went to go kill it. And there was a battle, and in the end, Clyde was trying to escape and save everybody. And the ogre was holding him by the tail, and he pulls him out onto this field and into the sunlight. And the light destroyed this beast of darkness, because it only could live in a dark forest and only came out at night. So the light destroyed it. And once he came to that, he was changed. Something released within Clyde. And then it shows him walking around, with his chest out, but it was different. Like earlier in the story, he had his chest out, he's walking, he was a Clydesdale. But the look on his face, the look in his eyes. And Bill Pete had just such a fantastic way of capturing emotion in the face of the characters that he drew. Um, but his stance was the same, but the look on the face was different. And he was calm. Like it was this like sense of knowing that Clyde had about himself. Like he knew he wasn't a coward anymore. It wasn't something he believed. He knew it because he had battled death. That whole representation, it was all symbolic, where he was able to battle that that aspect of himself and bring it to light and just destroy it. It got dissolved by the sun. And the dogs, they could smell that. And they're like, okay. They were no longer barking at him because they could sense the real courage. And this is partly why I love female interaction. I love BDSM as a pathway to knowledge. Because, women, they're just I would say they're nothing, but they're something. They're really something, but they're really nothing at the same time. They, if utilized well, they can become like a microcosm of the world, and they will show you who you are without them even trying. Some actually, my best female friend, I've known her, almost 30 years now. I've known her, and she had this gift. Like she had this great gift of insight, and I think that's why she's been my friend, because she had that ability to see people beyond their presentations, and she had a very funny way and very humorous way of exposing them, and they would never feel exposed. Like she'd laugh with them, and it was a great talent, and so she had my respect, and it's part of why we became such good friends amidst some very interesting experiences that we shared together. But I think for the most part, girls just don't consciously know that they are teaching you something. And it's not like they are teaching you something. It's like they're a vehicle that the lesson passes through, that you wouldn't otherwise get to if you weren't in an interacting experience with that person. So this is why I urge all my guys, like, hey, this isn't going to work if you're alone. Like let me rephrase that. It's going to take a long fucking time. It's gonna take a long fucking time to develop on your own, and it's gonna take focus and discipline and consistency for years. Most guys I know aren't that dedicated to their own personal development. Not like that. So when you're in situations with a woman, without them knowing, they become sort of like this conduit to self-knowledge, because they start reflecting things back to you. And like I said, I think for the most part, they're not even aware of this. It's even better that they're not aware. Like it just makes more sense that they're not, that they're just part of a process, part of a learning, like a learning cathode. And this is what, if you pay attention, it's part of the things that you can really grow from. And instead of really being distracted of like what's happening in that moment, pay more attention to like what's happening inside you. Hey, here's that little pig. Why does restrained desire tend to lead to deeper bonding compared to constant gratification? That's a very good question. Restrained desire. Well, I think it's as simple as we tend to want the things that we can't get. I think it touches on our sense of like exclusivity. We often If we're teased with something, then it becomes desirable, and then we don't always get our grasp around it. That just increases that desire. I think it's just a natural thing, and it's not just for humans. If I'm playing with my cat and I've got a piece of string and some little toy tied to the end of the string, and I'm playing around and I let him catch it, and I let him catch it again, I let him catch it again and again. After like a couple of times, maybe 3 times, 4 times, he'll just get bored. He'll get bored with it. But if I never let him catch it and I'm moving around too quickly, like the extreme opposite of constant gratification, then he'll also get bored. He doesn't have any stimulation. It's moving too quickly. But if I let him get it a little bit, sometimes, then I can keep him on the hook for quite a while, like until he gets tired, and then I give him a treat. So now he slowly become conditioned to enjoy that tension. And humans are the same way, I think. And this is why I tease you. And it's not for anything other than to keep that playful energy of the cat. And I think that again, as the leader, if you want to look at it from a dom perspective or man perspective, this is why it's so important to deal with your own neediness, your own hunger, right? Because if you're needy and hungry and she's needy and hungry, well, you're probably going to exhaust each other very quickly. To me, that's like burning a candle at both ends with very high flames, and it'll just melt, and then it's done. You consume everything out of it. But if someone has dealt with their neediness, and I encourage guys to be the first to do this. If it's a choice between the man or the woman dealing with this, I would say, man, deal with this. Deal with your neediness, deal with your hunger, so that you can control the tempo and you can slowly bring about hers, right? Because remember, typically speaking, I feel that women are more fluid. They have more capacity to become fluid. Even if you take the most subbiest of male subs and compare them to the subbiest of female subs, the female, I think, is going to be more fluid, like psychologically, emotionally, and physically fluid than the male sub. I could be wrong, but this is just something that my intuition is telling me. And so, but linked into that, this is where we have neuroticism. This is where we have the flows of tension, anxiety, depression, excitement, fear, projection, overthinking. Like, that's part of fluidity, right? Because stillness, solidness, doesn't move that way. Stillness doesn't overthink. Stillness doesn't have anxiety. Stillness doesn't have, isn't erratic. It's still. And so you bring yourself as the man into this state, and he then can help harness that, harness the fluidity, the chaos, what's going on in her. And this is when her neediness goes from being scattered and fear-based to something that's a little bit more focused and pleasure-based and safety-based. So it doesn't go away. It just gets rechanneled and slightly refined. And so this is this is again what can be done if you as the man treat your mind first. I'm first, then you. Leader first, follower second. And so this is, and I think that once she can see this, she can see this sort of model, then that's when service to the dom or service to the man takes on a different meaning. It's no longer, oh, I want to do this thing because I know it makes him happy. It's, I do this thing because it strengthens what he is becoming. And in turn, that makes my life more refined. That chaos becomes more refined. The chaos, the anxiety becomes reduced. The noise becomes a little quieter. So they become self-perpetuating. Okay? And it's really funny because I just didn't know what to say. It's so funny how some people are online, like with their projecting and things like that. And what did she say? Just this one dude, he was talking about, he was kind of like blowing some stuff out of the water, like about red pill and like some of the claims that they make, and he was just coming back and dispelling some of them. And I want to get him on my channel, but I think he's just getting too busy because he's like rising in fame pretty quickly, and I don't think he has time for my channel anymore. But anyways, he's saying something and I just agreed with him. I was like, yep. Like he was talking about like respect, like gaining respect from a woman. And red pill is all about this idea that if you have money and status and perhaps look good, that this means that you will be granted respect from the woman. And you might, but it's very thin. It's not really full of substance, right? It's quite superficial. And I just easily said money and status, and then I had the does not equal sign, you know, the equals with the line slashed through it, respect, right? So money and status does not equal respect. That's all I said. And this lady comes in, right? This lady comes in and she says, "What age are you living in, dude?" I'm like, what? Like, what is that? Perhaps she misread. Maybe she didn't know what the does not equal sign looks like, you know? And that's all I could think of. And then she comes in, left field. It's funny how, she says, "It's funny how your page is dedicated to the silencing, subordination, and submission of women, or slaves. That's as close as you'll get to ever living that reality in your imagination." And then it's the crying laughter next to a clown face emoji. And I'm just like dumbfounded. I was like, how? Like utterly clueless. Utterly clueless. Like I'm sure, you know, I'm sure, kitten, if you're still watching this, you're probably like thinking like, you're just as confounded as I am. Of course, this person doesn't know. But this is a representation of what I mean. It's a representation of what I mean about having surface understandings. Because there's surface understandings, there's also surface misunderstandings. People will see this, like the imagery that's on my screen. If you're on my Instagram, you see some of the images that I put up there, both photo and you know, AI painting generated. And people can look at that and go, "That's awful. Look at how she's being treated." And there should be something wrong with her. There must be something wrong with her. And I have to find the article, because there's an article that had like references to studies and things like that. But it was basically saying that people who engage in BDSM practices have no higher instances of childhood trauma than those that don't. So there's just like trauma doesn't determine whether someone is in BDSM or not, right? Because there's tons of fully drastically traumatized people in vanilla relationships. Like they don't even look at, they're like, oh, they're not sitting there like, "Oh yes, I would love to be choked and slapped." You know, like they don't even think about those things, yet they've got tons of trauma. right? So if that was the case, then we'd be seeing a lot of people with trauma in BDSM and purely untraumatized people in vanilla relationships. But no, trauma doesn't determine these kind of choices. There's other things that determine it. And yes, you're going to find people who are highly traumatized in BDSM. I've come across them. And I've also come across people who are highly traumatized in vanilla relationships. It just looks worse when someone's traumatized and they're like saying, slap me, or put me in this vinyl bodysuit or whatever, and strap me down and tie me into a pretzel, versus somebody who's day drinking. Like they're both coming from a place of hurt, anger, fear, and so on. It's just one has this visual that's taboo according to society, so they're like, that's worse, versus the lady who drinks every single day when she gets home from work. She has like half a bottle of wine. They're both bad. As a way of like, I need to cope with my trauma in some sort of self-destruction. So you're going to find that everywhere. And, but just because something appears to be self-destructive doesn't necessarily mean it is. And you can find this with people if you talk to, I think especially people who are into bondage, where they enjoy being restrained. And if you talk to them about what they get from it, like what someone gets from being fully restrained by rope or leather or vinyl, or some other apparatus, it brings about like so many different feelings. And a lot of times it's a certain level of comfort. And when they say that, it kind of reminds me of when I was swaddling my babies. I was a master swaddler. Like mine were so like nice and tight. They were like these little burritos. I loved swaddling because I was so good at it. And they were just like all up in there, and they'd be like crazy, like being like moody little baby. And I'd swaddle them and it would just calm right the fuck down. And so there's this sense of being encapsulated that calms people. It makes them feel safe. And for some people, the need for that or the desire for that doesn't go away. It's maintained. And some will look at that and say, well, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with how they're doing it. As if to say that one should not seek out feelings of safety, or they should be able to feel safe without that sort of thing. And maybe they can, but this is a much more fun way to go about it. Because when we bring kink into these things, surely someone can make themselves feel emotionally safe by doing something else. But by going in this particular pathway, it adds certain layers. It's different. It's like building, like if you've ever done woodwork, you can do like layers of varnish, or not varnish, but stain. That's the word I'm looking for. And the layers of stain, because they're thin and somewhat translucent, they start creating depth because the colors are all working off of each other as light passes through it. So you're creating layers of depth in this. So yes, I'm sure the people who love bondage, it's not like they go around their whole life being like, oh my gosh, I feel so off because I'm not restrained, and they can't possibly make themselves feel safe and calm without rope. And so without it, they're just like a mess. No, they're grown adults. They have their own ways of producing this feeling. But when they put it in that situation, when they go into, like a rope play dungeon or, organization, or they're with their person and they're using rope or whatever, it produces it's like a secondary or tertiary layer that satisfies a certain level, a certain portion of the mind that just can't be done otherwise. I think that's just an amazing thing. Let's see here. Okay, never mind. Yeah. I invited this guy, Trip Terrier, onto the show. It was last minute. I just wanted to see if he wanted to come on, but I don't think he saw my message. But he might be stepping back from putting up power dynamic type stuff on his page, because of these new reports coming out about the what is it, the tapes, with like Trump and I don't know, Epstein and all these things. I don't pay attention to any of that shit, but apparently like there's some like evidences that Trump and other people involved, they were sadists, and I guess non-consensual sadists or whatever. But the consent is the part that makes it different, because it's not the intensity, it's the consent part. And the whole notion really is to be able to explore with someone, and even better, to grow with someone that fits your way, your level, your style. All those terms seem somewhat limiting, but what I'm trying to say. And it's hard. And it's funny, it's hard within vanilla. It becomes even harder in kink because there's so many more variables. So like, let's say I'm like a level, like out of 10, let's say I'm a level 8 sadist, but the girl that I'm interested in is a level 4 masochist, or a level 2 masochist, or not a masochist at all. That's going to be tough, because especially if this is part of me, like it's not like a jack that I'm putting on or something that I'm just role playing, right? Let's say this is my lifestyle, or part of my lifestyle. It's an aspect of my lifestyle where I realize, you know what? It brings me pleasure to give pain at a somewhat high level. That's going to be an issue for some people. And it's going to be difficult to find someone who has like a mirrored or close to mirrored opposite of me. So coming into this, like this whole thing, this whole lifestyle is not easy. It's not easy to exist. It's not easy to grow. It's not easy to practice. And it's not easy to find someone who is on your level. And it's not easy to maintain. It's actually much more complicated and harder than vanilla relationships. I almost wish I could kind of like go back, but I can't. I've taken the lid off, and it vanished some time ago. And it's like, I'm stuck with it. I mean, I'm sure with will, I could say, all right, I'm done. I'm no longer doing this thing, but it's still there. I'm just choosing not to engage. But that doesn't mean it dissolves. It's here. And what I could assume forever. It's an aspect of my being and my presence. And so it becomes even harder when you are showing up authentically, vanilla or not. Things become harder. And I think this is why our culture is so flooded with certain symbols of what romantic love and relationships are supposed to look like. We see it in movies, literature. I think just movies and literature. Oh, music. Movies, literature, and music for decades upon decades, maybe even hundreds of years, of what this like basic formation can look like or should look like. And so we could be like, oh, well, that generally works. Like, let's all just do that. Because if we start involving ourselves, and the more we involve ourselves and our individuation, it kind of disrupts that. And this is kind of what we're seeing now in like various little pockets, like it kind of like with the whole poly thing. There's some people who genuinely scratched their head and said, monogamy, but why? I don't feel that. I know in myself that I have the capacity to genuinely love and want to be with more than one person at the same time. I know this to be a truth within myself. It's not just some mask to like fuck other people and whatever, cheat in the open. Like I genuinely feel this. And so there's so many other like ideologies and things like that with the individuation saying, listen, I want to make this how I want. And the prescription is so much easier to utilize. You just follow what the fucking thing is. That's all you gotta just shut up, follow the damn thing, and you're gonna be all right. And for the most part, if you do follow it, you don't question it, you don't follow your impulses, you just follow it, you will be fine. And I think this is kind of how we've developed tons of families that have built nations, right? And that's great. But we're at this point, there's been a bit of a renaissance in a way, a renaissance of thought, of people saying, but why? And they questioned all the status quos. And that's great, but it also sucks. But I'm of the mind that I don't think anything should be free from questioning. Question everything. And yeah, there's going to be some development from that. There's growth that comes from questioning and critical thinking and making decisions that are not based on emotions and things like that, or doing it just because this is how we always have done it. But there's also always a cost for every decision we make. And that's also what we're facing now. But that's just part of it. That's how things go. You can't get away with a cost-free choice. It just doesn't work. There was a cost to the choices made long ago. And there's a cost to the choices that we make now. And so while that's a lot easier, following a prescript, right? It's also harder to grow. And when you make your own choices, you make your own will, you create your own system, your own program based on your own needs, like really understanding your needs, really understanding your desires, really trying to show up authentically, which means dealing with your shadow, right? Going through those 4 stages that I was talking about with the Jungian alchemy, right? The Gnostic alchemy. Like that brings you to like a really unique place that does not fit fucking anything that ever was. And you have to establish it on your own. You are a pioneer, like just for yourself, not like for the world around you. Like, it's inconsequential. But when you do that, and you do it with your heart, you do bring your heart into these things. You do bring love into these things, into your authentic showing up, okay? And all the work that you do within that to becoming authentic, then it becomes much more rewarding. And it's harder. It's harder, but it's more rewarding. The easy path, the rewards aren't that great. The rewards stay on the same level as the prescription, which is all that very deep. It's just like, hey, this is what it looks like. This is what you should do, or this is what you can do. And these are the outcomes. And they're not very like soul quenching like there's no catharsis in that. There's no catharsis in following the prescription. But it makes things easy. It's smoother, But I'll take the bumps. I'll take those left hooks on the chin. Okay. I have no problem with that. And you find a girl who also has no problem with that. And you guys are like, I can already hear the grumbling. You're like, good luck. A woman who is willing to accept the pathway to self-realization and accountability? What? Don't you know that's their kryptonite? Well, you need to learn how to be kind of like my friend at the school who could just reach in, right? You reach in and you can just rub right on their that plastic ego, that plastic manufactured sense of self, which is being defended. And the way you do that, like I said, is you do it to yourself first. You reach in, you shape what's going on. You peel off and discard the crap that's been there, that manufactured sense of self that we went over before, like all that stuff. Once you do this, well, it allows you to reach in very easily into other people. And then you decide, right? You're no longer just swayed by, oh my gosh, she's so cute. Oh my gosh, look at her body. Look at her face. Oh, her hair. Oh, her tits, her ass. Oh, that pussy's fire. No, like none of that is, I mean, you can appreciate it, you know, like looking at a nice painting in a museum or something, but it's not really like influencing very much. It's influencing the rods and cones in your eyes, you know, but that's about it. And so it's at that point when you can really reach in, because if you're distracted by beauty, you can try to reach in, it'll glance off. It'll like veer off. Like if there's like a magnet there, but of the same pole, and it's just, you ever tried to touch two magnets that are positive, it just kind of goes and bounces off without even touching. And that's what happens. You know, because part of your mind is like, no, preserve the worship of beauty and sex. Preserve it. Oh, that feels so good. Right? And so your attempts to bring her to accountability, they glance off like a magnet of the same polarity, because you're trying to maintain this vision of this thing that cannot be touched, it cannot be affected, it cannot be manipulated. Because you hold this as like, oh, so pretty, you know? She's a baddie. She's so hot. No. Mm-mm. You know, and this is why I within my own system, this is just me, it's not prescriptive, but this is why within my own dynamic, I use phrases like filthy little pig. Like, I'm not trying to insult her. I'm actually trying to reorganize my own mind, and not to see her actually as a filthy little pig or something that's beneath me or that's actually dirty or anything like that. It's just reframes. It's reframing, right? Because I'm still a human male. I can still look at my sub and go, damn, she's fucking cute, and let that kind of flow into me and alter things. Okay. So I routinely, because I don't like to go with flows, right? Even if it's my own eyes or ears or impulses or whatever, I routinely use things to reframe myself. So I stay clean. And then there's the secondary benefit of doing the same thing, right? It reframes her. But of course, it's known that I'm not really trying to cause harm, and that in there's a little bit of love. There's a little bit of terms of endearment, you know, in the same way that the boy who really likes that girl at school, but all he does is pull her pigtails and makes her cry. Like, deep down, he really likes her. I mean, he's not doing these things for the reason that I am. He just has a problem expressing himself properly. but it's something similar in that hidden appreciation, that hidden love. And there's some charm to that, isn't it? There's some charm to like comparing, just saying to someone that you truly feel, I love you, I think you're beautiful. Like, sure, that's nice. But if it's translated non-verbally, subtly, and symbolically through something that on the surface appears like you're saying the opposite or doing the opposite, there's a different level to that. There's a bit of charm to that hits different. In the same way, like, hugs are great. They really are. Okay? And it's a very simple, distilled way to show that you care for someone. But you take that same caring and put it into a spanking or a face slapping. And you might be thinking, damn, you're fucking crazy. But it's the same sort of formula as the boy who likes the girl but pulls her pigtails. Again, he has different reasons. He can't express himself, but at the root of it is there's attraction, there's appreciation, there's I like this girl, and it's expressed in this other way. Now imagine if she knew this, but he still continued and she still continued. And maybe they wanted to keep it a little secret. So she remained in her reaction, how she reacts, and he remained in doing what he was doing. But underneath, it's like they knew that there was a subtle emotional, psychological communication going on that was almost more genuine than if you were to come out and say, hey, you know what, Jenny, I really like you. I think you're super cute. Like, that's how, like, a lot of this subtlety. And now imagine it goes to deep levels of trust, where she's starting to release her will into you. And she's releasing some of her identity into you. It's kind of like bleeding off into your presence. And now there's this like weird graft that's happened. Not completely of her entire self, but let's say just in varying degrees, depending on the person, situation, all that. But parts of herself is becoming into you. You know, like in the cartoon of Peter Pan, when his shadow was jumping around and he like grabbed it and like the girl, she stitched it to his heels. Sort of like that. You know, but it's done willfully. It's like wanting to do this, allowing this to happen. This blending, this bleeding off process. Now those things that had that that little subtle translation hidden in those actions, hidden in those words, now they mean something completely different. It's like it's even more immersive. You know, just even with like the simple thing of daddy. You know, you've got players, people who just play, kinksters, vanilla people. There's just like, you know, the sub or the girl. She may not even be accustomed to power dynamics. She's like says daddy, right? A very common thing. And it'll be fun in the moment. It feels good in the moment. It's charming, right? And then the next day it's gone, you know? But depending on that, the complexity, the subtleties of their relationship, daddy can mean something completely different. Perhaps something on a level, emotionally speaking, that she can't quite even put into words, because surely it has nothing to do with fatherhood and fathership and that sort of thing. Okay, it's just a sound. And if you take it out of that, you remove the context out of this like familiar or familial relationship, right? Out of the context of family. Her emotions and her attachment to what that sound means, daddy, right? It's, you know, it takes on this whole other form for her. Especially when there's that profound levels of trust to the point where her identity is thinning some of it's bleeding into your identity. She's this extension. And now when she says daddy, this means something completely different. It's no longer just this fun, sexy, cute little thing that she says. It still is those things, but it's also much more. All of these things can be that. Being blindfolded, being tied up, being spanked, being dripped with hot wax, or whatever, humiliated, or held, just a simple holding. It all becomes something different when you've got someone who's surrendering into you. All of this stuff modifies dramatically. Just hugging her is a different thing altogether. When there is this sense of her releasing, like releasing prior to that, or releasing as it's happening. And this is why I, despite the difficulties of growth, I'm still continuing on this. I'm still promoting this. I'm not telling people that they should, but I'm encouraging people to explore. I wish, part of my instinct, that girl who made that weird comment about me, wanting to subjugate women. Think about it. What all I just described, did that sound like subjugation? It's probably a level of freedom and release that she has never even conceptualized, never even thought about. And all I heard when she said that, out of such out of context for what the video and my comment was, is all I saw was pain. I said, man, this is probably someone who's just responding and reacting knee-jerk out of pain. So I didn't want to say anything, because all I would do was just, I'm not the type of person where I can just, you're hurting? Here, let me twist my finger into you a little bit, right? What's the point of that? All it's going to do is just make them tense up and harden even more around that pain. So the best thing to do is just shut up, because it's nothing that I say is ever going to really do anything. So really, my initial thing was recognizing the pain and wanting to help her understand. But that would require training. She would have to engage with me on a weekly basis at the very least and talk through things. I would have to gain her trust so that she would start opening and then releasing, just so she could even come to a position of just understanding what I'm doing. Not even participating or trying it out, just to come to a place of understanding without having an emotional trigger of defense or attack. And I'm well, that is so far out of reach. This is just an NPC online, so you just let it go. Oh, this is a good question. I've gone over this in other videos, but it's pretty simple. It's to test your rigidity. And I don't mean rigidity in you having strong opinions about certain things. That's not what I mean by rigidity. It's to see if you fold. So, and this can be done in very simple ways, like you're getting ready to go out and you put on a sweater and she looks at you and she says, "You're wearing that." That's a small test, to testing you. And this can be either just a natural reaction that she's doing, a subconscious thing, or she's consciously aware of what she's doing and seeing how you respond. And I think the second one is less common than the first. But regardless, Her conscious and subconscious mind is seeing how you're going to handle that. Are you going to fold and go, oh, you think this is bad? Well, what sweater should I wear? I'd like to wear a sweater. I've got like 12 of them. Which one do you think I should wear? Or something like that. Right? So if you defend, what do you mean? This is a great sweater. Explain. Well, I got this sweater or I'm wearing this sweater because my mom gave it to me, and today is, the anniversary of whatever, You're trying to explain it away. Like, oh, this is a really important sweater to me, and I really wanted to wear it today. You're excusing. So you start excusing her behavior in your mind. You're like, she deserves to criticize my clothing choices because, truth be told, it's a pretty ugly sweater. And rationalizing, it's along the same lines, right? Oh, she's that kind of girl. Like, she criticizes everything. So, like me, it just kind of like, that's just how she is. So it's really not that big of a deal. All four of those things, the defend, excuse, explain, and rationalize, you're folding. You're showing her that your spine is made of rubber, that it's not made of bone and strengthened by sinews, right? You're not rigid, right? That's the rigidity that I was talking about, the ability to stand straight, okay? And this isn't being standoffish. I mean, like, bitch, what the fuck are you questioning my clothing for? It's not like that. It's how you calmly deal with that situation. And there's a number of ways that you can respond. You can just simply ignore it, like as if she never even spoke. Right? There's so many ways that you can go about this. You can fog her if you feel like it. You can do mirroring and labeling, whatever it is, right? But if you respond with emotion, like either shrinking or defending, getting upset, like that's telling her subconscious that you are not as grounded as she might think you are. And this is why women test, because they know within themselves that there's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of variety. There's a lot of there's a lot of flux that happens within them on a moment-to-moment basis. And it's exhausting. It's absolutely exhausting to have this like 10,000 RPM hamster wheel going on. You ever see those videos of those hamsters and their legs are like a blur as they're running on those hamster wheels? It's quite funny and cute to watch them. And then they lose their footing and then they start spinning with the thing and they're like, oh. It's very funny. But they have that 10,000 RPM hamster wheel in their head constantly. And sometimes there's like more wheels added and they get like 5 hamster wheels all ticking away. And I imagine it's psychologically, emotionally, and therefore physically exhausting. So part of that, and it's linked to the survival thing, the evolutionary psychology and all that stuff. They're like, I need to find something that is absolutely not like me, that is rigid, that is calm, which means likely dependable, likely reliable, likely trustworthy, such that this like craziness that I hold within me, which is just part of my nature, like I'm not trying to like stop it. I don't even think I could stop it if I tried, but I can kind of like settle into this. And surely if he knows what he's doing, he can then kind of put some dampeners on this. You know, some things that slow down the vibration, that dampen the vibration that's happening in here, right? And this is something that helps them settle. And then the nervous system starts associating your presence with a greater sense of calm. And then if you really know what you're doing, you're not entirely consistent with that. You provide intermittent reinforcement. All right. So it's not calm all the time. Occasionally, just through simple little things like calling you a filthy little pig, you add these spikes of irregularity that cause just this momentary sensation that is not necessarily purposely unsettling. Okay. It's just not settled and calm. It's just providing these little things that that shift the consciousness just a little bit, ever so slightly. It's kind of like what immediately, it's like everything relates to motorcycles in my mind. They say, like, if you're going on a long trip on a bike, and you're on just like a long stretch of highway, you should not just hold the throttle in a fixed position. You should actually, from time to time, vary the RPMs, like, so bring them up a little bit more and bring them down a little bit more, but maintain your overall speed. And that helps the motor from like getting taxed. So I think at any RPM of the mind, if it's maintained at a certain thing too consistently, then it gets kind of worn out, even if it's safety. Again, the benefits of BDSM, because now I can manufacture feelings that counter that safety with an underlying foundation of safety. So within that's established, I can make her feel scared. I can make her feel worried. I can make her doubt. I can make her, I don't know, all sorts of feelings that are counter to safety. But it's just like tasting it at a like a buffet, just so that the normalcy of safety doesn't become boring. And that's one of the great things about the path of BDSM, is that it provides limitless possibilities, limitless creativity. Yeah, that's the beginning of it. And then I think it's just part of their nature. It's part of their nature to just check, even when there's consistency, because the consistency is like, well, wait a second, like, is this really consistent, right? Is he really firm? Okay, because there are men out here who are very good at cosplaying, because we have things like YouTube, we have things like podcasts, like audio visual podcasts, where guys who either are or are not a version of him can talk about the concepts of these things, right? This is why I don't talk very much about specific things to say and do, because I know idiots are going to take that and go, well, this guy here said it, and therefore it must be the truth. So I'm going to try this thing, and it's going to be a way to kind of alter the perception, right, by outward behavior, like I was talking before, and create a semblance of consistency. And then she becomes manipulated into believing that the guy is something that he is not. And I think there's a healthy, natural doubt that arises from time to time, where she just wants to see if you're still him, or you are what you really are, or what you are what she perceives you to be. And that's okay. Like, that's just part of the natural conditioning. It's not, I think that part of it is sometimes due to the fault of the man by being inconsistent, and part of it has to do with her natural inclination to make sure. And so I think both of these are true. And that second part is just based around survival. Is that just innate desire to be like, I need to make sure that this is going to be conducive for my genetic future. And that's just the way it goes. I don't really think anything of it. I think people take, especially in this space of guys like learning about manhood and behavior and women and all that stuff, they take the things that women do just way too seriously. What do I do? What do I do? She tests me. What do I say? It's like, well, what I'm reading from that is that you're afraid to lose her, for one. So why don't you deal with that first? Because that's way more important. Okay. What do I do? What do I say? Because you're afraid of fucking it up, afraid of her seeing you wrong, and then you lose her. It's like, well, you've got a larger problem on your hand because you're afraid of losing her. Deal with that problem, because that problem is much more complicated and it's going to affect everything. So better get to work. That's what I'd be more concerned about. And frankly, like, once your presence is, I guess, worked out, developed, and you just continue developing it, it doesn't really matter very much what you say. There's a lot, like, you could do research. There's so much like tactical methods of how to deal with the things that women say. And I would argue that if you're on that level, you're still playing on her chessboard, if that makes sense. You're still reacting to her inputs. And that's why my first reaction to that question was, why do you have to say anything at all when she tests you? Because by doing that, you are acknowledging and confirming that there's a test, like a tester and a testee. And I don't say to not acknowledge this out of arrogance, but out of ignorance. What test? Like, honestly, what test? Because if you don't see her as something that you're trying to measure into, that you're afraid of losing, then you're not going to acknowledge any test. And not out of a willful not acknowledging, you simply don't fucking see it. You don't hear it. Like, she says, why are you wearing that sweater? Because I saw it in my drawer and I put it on. I'm wearing the sweater because I'm wearing it. Like, it's just the plain objective thing. Why are you wearing this? Because I put it on. That's why I'm wearing it. Like, that's for the same reason why I put on my shoes, why I brush my beard. Like, I did it because I did it. And when you're looking into like the reasons and all this stuff, you're trying to, what that does is it legitimizes the test. All you have to do is just understand that women will test. It's part of their survival mechanism. It's okay. It's natural. And it's actually good for us, because if they didn't have that, then women would be copulating and creating progeny with the sea of losers that were courageous enough to get at her. So it's better for us that women have this natural inclination to test, because it keeps things, well, it's one mechanism that helps keep things on the straight and narrow. It's not foolproof, obviously, but it's better if it doesn't exist at all. But if you're that guy, if you're grounded, you have the mountain mind, the spirit of one, it doesn't even exist. All right. I think I'm going to pull this to a close. We're almost at midnight here. This has been an interesting conversation. Even though Trip didn't make it on here, still a good conversation. And appreciate the questions. I know it's kind of hard to ask questions of me because it's just stuff that's, I get it. It's like, what do I ask? Yeah, I get it. So, but I appreciate you being here. Yeah. Dead eye contact, call me affirm, turn the question in on itself because this is what I'm wearing. Yeah. Why are you wearing this? Because it's on my body. It's really, yeah, it's really just nothing to really think about. And like the more you think about it, the stronger the system becomes because you're legitimizing the existence of it. You're acknowledging it. There's far greater things to acknowledge. Like you could sweep past this and acknowledge her state. Like maybe like you pick up like maybe she's feeling uneasy. And this was just her expressing some uneasiness that she has that has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with your sweater. It could be part of something that's going on in her that's causing just a general sense of doubt, and that doubt gets projected. So you ignore it. Baby, I get a feeling that I get a feeling of a little bit of like, you're feeling uncomfortable right now. Is everything all right? I don't know, you just got this look in your eye. You doing okay? Is this something you want to talk about? And just bypass. But it comes through reading. Like if you actually read that, you can pick up on that uncertainty within her. Is there something you're feeling uncertain about? Because I don't think it's about the sweater. And if she trusts you, that kind of question has a lot more meaning. It hits different. All right, so yeah, Guns, thank you. For those of you who want to grab a consultation, follow the links or go to the description of the videos, and we can get to talking, because all of this changes when it becomes an individual process. It really is just all about you and the things that you need to do, things you want to do, things you must do, things you must understand, and it's all an individual basis. Now, there's no cookie cut thing out here, not one. Like if everyone's like trying to sell you like a program that's gonna like solve your problems, they're like, what do they say? I've got a bridge to sell you. So, I forget that phrase, but yeah, it's not it, because this is an individual process. All right, this is why mentorship takes a while. I've got guys who've been with me for months and they're just coming out going, oh, and like the lights are just kind of turning on. And that leads to a whole other level of starting over, which leads to lights turning on, and then another level of starting over. You're not gonna find it in a quick fix. So please, I encourage you to oh yeah? Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it, or continue to enjoy it, please. But if it solved all your problems, that's an amazing book. I didn't intend for that, but I hope you're being a little bit cheeky. But yeah, grab up a consultation, go on the website, go into tutorials. There's a number of short lessons in there, very accessible. So check that out. They're quite good. And if you have any questions, you can reach me through the website. There's a contact, and I get the email directly to me. So thanks once again for being here on the live, and thank you for checking me on the replays. We'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.